It is 11 at night in a hospital parking garage, and a man is sitting in a parked car with the driver door open just enough to keep the dome light on. The car is chiming at him, soft and patient, telling him the door is ajar. He lets it chime. 40 minutes ago, a doctor with kind eyes said the one word his family has spent 6 months praying they would never hear. His wife is upstairs on the 4th floor, asleep on the good drugs, and their daughter is on a plane somewhere over Kansas, coming home early. He has not cried. That is the strange part. He keeps waiting for the crying to start the way you wait for weather, and it does not come. What comes instead is his own voice, low, addressed to the windshield, saying a sentence he has never said in 40 years of church. I am not asking you to undo it. I know you are not going to undo it. Just tell me why. That is all I want now. Just tell me why. Hold that man in the car, with the door chiming, because his prayer is about 4,000 years old. It was first prayed by a man sitting on a garbage heap outside a town called Uz, a man who had lost more in one afternoon than most of us will lose in a lifetime. And here is what makes his story the most unsettling book in your Bible. That man got what almost nobody gets. God himself eventually showed up and spoke to him, out loud, at length, and in everything God said. He never once answered the question. He never told Job why. Before it was over, Job would ask 9 questions from that ash heap. 9 questions that every serious believer, sooner or later, ends up facing in some parking garage of their own. This is the road through all 9, and it begins with the question underneath the other 8, the one Job asked first, the one that scares us so much. We pretend the Bible does not contain it. The book opens on a man you would have wanted to know. The text calls him blameless and upright. And then it shows you what that looked like on an ordinary Tuesday. Job was the man who got up before dawn after every one of his children's birthday feasts and offered sacrifices for each of them by name, just in case. The text says, just in case one of them had sinned in their hearts without knowing it. Read that again, slowly. Not sins anyone saw, sins that might have happened invisibly inside the hearts of his grown children. This is the most careful father in the Bible. This is a man running spiritual insurance policies on hypothetical failures. If you have ever lain awake building contingency plans for people you love, you already understand Job better than most sermons do. He was the richest man in the East, and none of his wealth had made him careless. He was covering every base a human being can cover. And then the Bible does something it does nowhere else. It pulls back the curtain on a conversation in heaven, a challenge concerning the nature of genuine faith, a question raised in the courts of God about whether any man loves God for free, or whether every believer is secretly a customer. You can read that scene for yourself in the first 2 chapters. But I need you to hold one fact about it with both hands, because the entire book turns on it. Job never saw that scene. Job was never told about that scene. You, watching this, know something about Job's suffering that Job himself was never given. Not on the ash heap, not in the whirlwind, not anywhere in the 140 years he lived after. Remember that. We will come back to it at the end of this road. And when we do, it is going to rearrange something in you. What Job got, instead of an explanation, was a single ordinary day that took everything, 4 messengers, and the text runs them together on purpose, each one arriving while the last one is still speaking. The oxen and donkeys, taken by raiders. Your servants are dead, and I alone escaped to tell you. While he is still speaking, another, fire from the sky, the sheep and the shepherds, gone, and I alone escaped to tell you. While he is still speaking, another, Chaldean raiding parties, the camels, the men, gone, and while he is still speaking, the 4th messenger, the one whose first words are, your sons and your daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house. Every parent listening just felt their stomach drop, because you know what a sentence that begins that way is about to do. A great wind came in off the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on them, all 10. One wind. Mark that wind. File it away. A windstorm is the thing that took Job's children. And much later in this story, when God finally decides to speak, pay very close attention to what he chooses to speak from. Job's response to that day is one of the most staggering paragraphs in ancient literature. He tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground, and worshipped. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Then came the boils, crown to soul, and the text gives us a detail so specific it can only be memory. Job took a piece of broken pottery, a shard from some jar that used to be whole, and sat in the ashes, scraping his own skin with it. Keep your eye on that potsherd, a broken piece of something that used to be whole, held in a hand that used to hold everything. It is going to come back before this road ends. And when it does, it will be carrying the most famous sentence in the book. His wife spoke 7 words to him, and we will deal gently with her later, because she buried 10 children that day too, and nobody wrote down her tears. 3 friends came from a distance, and when they saw him, they did not recognize him, and they wept. And then they did something remarkable. They sat down on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights, and nobody said a word. 7 days. Hold that too. And then, at the start of chapter 3, the most patient man in the Bible opens his mouth. And here is your first question. And it is not polite. Job does not curse God. Job curses the day he was born. May the day of my birth perish. Why did I not perish at birth? An entire chapter, uncensored, of a righteous man wishing himself out of existence, asking why light is given to a man whose way is hidden. And God let it into the book. No editor softened it. No angel interrupted it. Scripture gave the worst night of a believer's soul a whole chapter with his name on it. Now hear this part carefully, and hear it warm. Job said those words out loud, in daylight, in front of his friends, with his face toward heaven. He did not swallow them. He put the darkest sentence he had on the table, where God and everybody could see it. And notice what he never says. In this chapter, or any other, Satan predicted. In that scene, Job never saw that Job would curse God to his face. 42 chapters. Go look. It never happens. The man cursed his birthday. He questioned everything. He shook his fist at the sky, and he never once let go of the God he was shaking it at. So here is the question this chapter leaves at your feet. Somewhere along the way, Most of us picked up a rule that says certain sentences are not allowed inside faith. Who taught you that? Because the oldest book in your Bible just spent a full chapter proving otherwise. Job had not cursed God, but the three men sitting silently in the ashes beside him had been listening to every word, and they were about to do something worse to Job than anything the wind had done. They were about to explain it. It is a Saturday afternoon in a church fellowship hall in Ohio, and a mother who buried her son this morning is standing next to a table full of casseroles, shaking hands. She is doing something nobody in the room can see. She is counting. Everything happens for a reason. That is one. God needed another angel. 2. He never gives us more than we can handle. And that one is not even in the Bible. People just think it is. 3. Heaven must have needed him more than we did. 4. By the 9th handshake, she has learned something about grief they do not put in the pamphlets. That the sentences meant to comfort you can land like tiny verdicts, each one quietly suggesting that somewhere behind the curtain there is a good reason her boy is in the ground, which means somebody signed off on it, which means she is supposed to make peace with the signature. And then, at handshake number 11 or 12, a colder thought moves through her, and it is the one that will keep her up tonight. She has said these exact sentences to other people, at other funerals, standing next to other casseroles. She meant them kindly. She wonders now what she was actually doing. The book of Job knows precisely what she was doing, and it is the only book in the Bible that dedicates 30 chapters to it. Start with what the three friends got right, because they got one thing very right, and it is the part everybody skips. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar heard about Job's disaster and came. They did not send word. They came from 3 different regions. And when they saw him ruined on that ash heap, they tore their robes and wept out loud. And then they sat down in the dirt beside him and said nothing for 7 days and 7 nights, because they saw how great his suffering was. To this day, when a Jewish family buries someone, the tradition called sitting Shiva carries a rule that comes straight out of moments like this one. You do not speak to the mourner until the mourner speaks first. The grief sets the agenda for 7 days. 3 men got that exactly right. Their presence was doing what presence does, and every hour they kept their mouths shut. They were helping. Then Job spoke his chapter 3, that raw black chapter you just heard, and his friends could not bear it, and they started talking. And the moment they started talking, they started wounding. Understand who these men were, because the lazy version of this story turns them into villains and fools. And they were neither. That is what should scare you. Eliphaz is the gray-haired elder statesman, and he argues from experience. As I have observed, he says, those who plow evil reap it. He even describes a spiritual encounter, a spirit gliding past his face in the night, a voice asking whether a mortal can be more righteous than God. This is not a shallow man. This is a man with decades and visions and gravitas. Bildad argues from tradition. Ask the former generations. Find out what their ancestors learned. And Zophar argues from hard doctrinal certainty. God has even forgotten some of your sin. He tells a man covered in boils, meaning you actually deserve worse than this. Experience, tradition, and doctrine Three voices you can still hear in any church lobby in America. I have seen how God works. The old saints always said, Scripture is clear. The building materials of their speeches were mostly true things. The house they built with them fell on a grieving man, because underneath all three voices sat one belief, the same belief, and it was the operating system of their entire world. The universe is morally predictable. Good people are rewarded. Bad people suffer, therefore. And here is the turn where comfort becomes cross-examination. If you are suffering this much, something in your ledger explains it. Confess it, and this stops. Eliphaz says it gently at first. Bildad says it harder. Your children died. Perhaps it was their sin. Imagine hearing that sentence with 10 fresh graves behind your house. Zophar says it coldest of all, round after round. 3 good men escalate against a groaning invalid. And the question you should be asking is why? Why did they need it to be true so badly? Here is why. And this is the sentence I want you to carry out of this chapter. They needed Job to be guilty. Because if Job was innocent, then what happened to Job could happen to them. Sit with that. These men had flocks. These men had children. And in front of them sat proof that a blameless man could lose all of it in one afternoon. No warning, no reason given. That proof was unbearable. So their theology went to work, not on Job's comfort, but on their own terror, sanding the randomness off the disaster, locating a cause, restoring the fence around their own families. Every explanation they offered was a brick back in the wall between his life and theirs. People do not always explain your suffering because they understand it. Sometimes they explain it because your unexplained pain is a hole in the floor of their world, and they will throw anything into that hole to close it, including you. That is the first counterfeit answer this book drags into the light. The explanation dressed up as comfort, and there is a simple way to check the label. So check it. Real comfort makes the sufferer less alone. A rushed explanation makes the explainer less afraid. One of them serves the person in the ashes. The other one serves the person standing safely beside the ashes. And the wounded can always tell the difference, even when they are too polite to say so. The mother at the casserole table could tell. You could tell the last time it happened to you. So here is this chapter's question, and it has 2 edges. So hold it carefully. Which of those sentences has been said to you at your worst hour, and you smiled and nodded while something in you quietly bled? And now the harder edge. When did you say one? Not from cruelty, from fear, the same fear as Eliphaz. The fear of a universe where casseroles sometimes arrive at the houses of the innocent. There is a way back from that, and this book will show it to us before it ends. And it runs through the last person you would expect. Job's friends believed to the final chapter that they were defending God. Every speech, every doctrine, every escalation, offered up as a defense of heaven. Hold that belief up to the light one last time and look through it. Because the day is coming, at the far end of this road, when God will finally speak his own verdict about who in those ashes told the truth about him. And I will tell you now, it is not going to fall the way anyone in that circle expected. But that verdict is a long way off, because Job, scraping his skin under the weight of their sermons, is about to stop answering his friends altogether. He is about to turn his face straight up at the sky and do the thing the polite version of faith says you must never do. He is about to tell God exactly how angry he is. It is 1 in the morning, and a woman is sitting on the floor of her walk-in closet, because it is the only room in the house with a door nobody asks about. Her husband is asleep. Her kids are asleep. She came in here to pray, the way she has prayed for 30 years. And she starts the way she was trained to start. Father, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your faithfulness. And somewhere in the middle of the second sentence, something in her simply runs out. The word stop. She sits there in the dark between the winter coats, and for the first time in 3 decades of walking with God, she says the true thing instead. I am angry at you. I have been angry at you for 2 years, and I am scared to death to be saying it. Then she claps her hand over her own mouth. Actual reflex. Actual hand. And she waits, the way a child waits after breaking something, for the sound of the ceiling coming down. The ceiling does not come down. The furnace hums. The coats hang there. And in the quiet, after her worst sentence, she notices something she cannot explain yet. For the first time in 2 years, she feels like she was actually in the room while she prayed. Job got to that closet about 4,000 years ahead of her. By chapter 6, his friends have started their sermons, and Job has stopped sleeping. Chapter 7 gives you his nights, and it reads like a diary written at 3 in the morning. When I lie down, I think, how long before I get up? The night drags on, and I toss until dawn. My days pass without hope. Anyone who has done real time with insomnia knows that arithmetic, watching the ceiling do nothing, doing the math on how many hours are left before the alarm makes it official. Job's body is covered in sores. His nights are a slow crawl, and somewhere in that crawl he arrives at a decision, and he announces it out loud, and it is one of the hinges of the whole book. Therefore I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. And a few chapters later he goes further. I will give free rein to my complaint. Free rein. Loose the horse. Drop the reins entirely, and let the animal run wherever the pain takes it. And run it does. Job tells God that he watches him so closely he cannot even swallow his own spit in peace. He asks God, does it please you to oppress me, to spurn the work of your hands, while you smile on the schemes of the wicked? He says, you formed me with your own hands, and now you are destroying me. These are not the sentences of a greeting card. These are accusations. If a man stood up in a Wednesday night prayer meeting and prayed 1 paragraph of Job chapter 10, word for word, somebody would follow him to the parking lot afterward, worried about his soul. And yet, watch the direction of every one of those sentences. The 3 friends talk about God, third person, start to finish, chapter after chapter. God does this. God never does that. The Almighty, always. The Almighty, never. Their grammar is flawless, and their doctrine is organized, and they are talking about God the way you talk about someone who has left the room. Job yells at God. Second person. You formed me. You watch me. You are silent. Why will you not answer me? Every complaint, every accusation, every raw and bleeding paragraph is aimed straight up, delivered to the face of the one it concerns. The friends sound reverent and have quietly stopped speaking to him. Job sounds furious and never once stops speaking to him. And here is the thing about fury that religion keeps forgetting. Nobody yells at a stranger for leaving. You do not scream, "Why did you abandon me?" at somebody you never trusted in the first place. The rawness of Job's protest is the measure of the relationship it is tearing through. His anger is not the opposite of his faith. His anger is his faith, with the wind knocked out of it, still refusing to change the address on the envelope. There was a woman about 1,000 years after Job who prayed so honestly at the doorway of God's own house that the priest on duty accused her of being drunk. And God answered her prayer with a prophet. She was in this same family line. It is an old family, the family of people who bring God the first draft. Now, be careful here, because this truth can curdle into a slogan. And I do not want to hand you a slogan. Anger at God is not automatically holy. There is a bitterness that curses and walks away, and that is a door closing. And this book is not about that. What Job shows us is something more specific and more useful. Honest protest, spoken to God's face, can be closer to real faith than polite words recited after the heart has already quietly left the building. The wound presented is nearer to him than the smile performed. One of those can be healed. The other one cannot even be examined. Which brings us to the counterfeit hiding in this chapter. And it may have been kneeling beside your bed for years. It is composure wearing the costume of faith. It was taught to most of us early. Calm down first, then pray. Get the tone right. Thank him before you ask him. Keep your voice steady. Keep it brief. Keep it positive. And so, night after night, a carefully edited delegate shows up to the meeting with God. Briefcase full of acceptable sentences, while the actual person, the frightened one, the furious one, the one doing the bleeding, waits outside in the car. Here is the test, and it is simple. Real faith brings the whole person into the room. Performed composure sends a representative, and after 30 years of representative prayers, a believer can wake up one day with the strange ache of a person who has never actually been met, and conclude that God feels far away, when the truth is that God has simply never been introduced to anyone but the delegate. The woman in the closet retired her delegate at 1 a.m, with her hand over her own mouth. It was the most honest prayer of her adult life, and it was the angriest. And I am telling you, those two facts are related. So here is the question this chapter sets down in front of you, and answer it in the dark where nobody is grading. What is the sentence you have been editing out of your prayers? You know the one. You have rerouted around it for months or years, translated it into church language, sanded the anger off of it, softened it until it could pass inspection. Job chapter 7, verse 11 has been sitting in your Bible this whole time, giving you permission you never used. I will not keep silent. But honesty has a price tag, and Job is about to read it, because there is something scarier than holding your true sentence inside. It is saying the true sentence, all of it, out loud, at the sky, with your whole chest, and hearing nothing back. There is a chair by a kitchen window in a house in Tennessee, and for 14 years, a man has sat in it at 6:15 every morning to pray. Same chair, Same coffee, same worn Bible with the cracked spine on the same left armrest. For most of those 14 years, the chair was the warmest 15 minutes of his day. Then came the year everything doubled up. 47 job applications, 47 rejections. A man in his 50s learning what the word overqualified actually means. And in the same stretch of months, his wife's diagnosis and the schedule of infusions and the new vocabulary no husband wants to become fluent in. He kept sitting in the chair, and somewhere in that year, without a sound, without a decision, the chair went empty on him. Not his end of it, the other end. He still believes God exists. That is what makes it hard to explain to anyone. He is not doubting the existence of God. He is experiencing the absence of God, which is a different animal entirely. He says the words at 6:15 and they sound like a man talking in an empty house. He describes it one way, one time, to no one but himself. It feels like standing in your own backyard on a cold night, looking at the lit windows of the house next door. The light is real. The warmth is real. It is just real somewhere else. And here is the detail I need you to hold on to. He still sits in the chair. Every morning. 6:15. Coffee. Cracked spine. Silence. He could not tell you why. Hold that. Because this chapter is going to come back for it. Job chapter 23 is that chair, 4,000 years early. By this point in the book, Job has said everything. He has grieved. He has protested. He has accused. He has dropped the reins entirely. And the heavens over the ash heap have given him back exactly nothing. So in chapter 23 he says the quiet part out loud. And it is one of the loneliest passages in all of Scripture. If only I knew where to find him. If only I could go to his dwelling. I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me. And then Job does something that reads like a man pacing a compass. Listen to the geography of it. If I go to the east, he is not there. If I go to the west, I do not find him. When he is at work in the north, I do not see him. When he turns to the south, I catch no glimpse of him. East, west, north, south. A man standing in the center of his own ruined life, turning a full circle, scanning every horizon for the God he has served since his youth, and coming back around to where he started with empty eyes. That paragraph was written thousands of years ago, and it could have been written by the man in the chair last Tuesday. It is the most modern ache in the whole Old Testament. The ache of the believer who cannot stop believing and cannot find the one he believes in. Now, at this exact point in the road, there is a strong temptation, and I am going to name it and then refuse it. The temptation is to rush in and fix this, to say what 100 sermons have said. God is silent because he is working behind the scenes. His silence is a setup for a comeback. Absence is just presence you cannot see yet. And listen, there are days when a sentence like that is a rope to a drowning person. And I am not here to cut ropes, but be very careful. Because that move, explaining a silence the text does not explain, is exactly the move that got Eliphaz and his friends in trouble. They could not stand an unexplained disaster, so they invented an explanation. We cannot stand an unexplained silence, so we invent a purpose for it. Same reflex, same fear, better manners. The book of Job does not hand Job a reason for the silence. So for a few more minutes, neither will I. Some things have to be sat in before they can be understood. And the people who taught us that were 3 friends on an ash heap. During the 1 week, they did everything right. Which raises a question. This book has been quietly building since chapter 2, and it is time to say it plainly. There are 2 silences in the book of Job. The friends were silent for 7 days. And it was the best gift anyone gives Job in the entire story. Presence without commentary, company without a verdict. Then heaven goes silent for 30-some chapters, and it nearly takes Job apart. So which is it? Is silence company? Or is silence abandonnement? Here is the difference. And it is the whole difference. The friends were silent on the ground beside him, close enough to see, close enough to touch, ashes on their own heads. Their silence had an address, heaven's silence, as far as Job could tell, had none. That phrase is the hinge. As far as Job could tell, because now read the verse that comes next, the one that has been sitting in chapter 23 all along, right after the compass. East, west, north, south. I cannot find him. I catch no glimpse of him. And then, with no transition at all, Job says this, but he knows the way that I take. Stop. Read it again. Slowly. Both halves in one breath. I cannot see him anywhere, but he sees me. Job searches 4 horizons and finds nothing, and then plants his flag on the only ground he has left. My eyes have failed to locate God. That is a fact, and I will not pretend otherwise. But I refuse the conclusion that his eyes have failed to locate me. I am not tracking him. Fine. He is tracking me. The comfort Job reaches for, in the worst silence of his life, is not I found him after all. It is I am found. Faith, in chapter 23, is not the ability to see. It is the stubborn conviction of being seen. And that is the counterfeit this chapter drags into the light. The oldest and most natural counterfeit of them all. Silence means absence. Feel how reasonable it is. He did not answer, so he is not listening. I cannot sense him, so he has left. It feels less like a belief and more like a plain reading of the evidence. But look closer at who is doing the writing. Pain is drafting that conclusion for you and asking you to sign it. And pain is a real witness about one thing only: itself. The ache is genuine data about the ache. It is very poor data about the location of God. There were 12 men in a boat once, in a storm, with God himself asleep in the stern, and they looked at his closed eyes and concluded he did not care whether they lived or died. They were wrong by the length of the boat. The feeling of distance was real. The distance was not. The man in the chair in Tennessee does not know any of this consciously. He just keeps sitting in the chair. 6:15. Coffee. Silence. And I want to say something about that man that he would never say about himself. Every morning that he lowers himself into that chair with no feeling, no answer, no lit window, and speaks into what his senses swear is an empty house, he is praying one of the oldest prayers in the world. The chair is the prayer, showing up to a silence. Morning after morning, because of who you believe is on the other side of it. That is not the failure of faith. That is close to the definition of it. Anybody can talk to a burning bush. It takes something else entirely to keep talking to a quiet sky. So here is this chapter's question. Where is your 6:15 chair? The habit you have kept through the silence. The seat you keep taking with no evidence. The door you keep knocking on softly. You may have been telling yourself it proves nothing, that it is just routine, just muscle memory left over from a warmer season. Look again. It may be the truest sentence you are currently saying to God, and you are saying it without words, every single morning. But Job cannot sit still in it any longer. The silence has done to him what long silence does to a man with a case to make. It has hardened his grief into resolve. If God will not come to him, if the east and the west and the north and the south stay empty, then there is exactly one move left on the board. And it is the boldest move any sufferer in Scripture ever made. If the judge will not appear, Job will summon him. He is about to take God to court. It is 9 in the morning in a county courthouse, and a woman in her best church clothes is walking into a room where she has already lost. She does not know that yet. She is here because an insurance company denied the treatment her husband's doctors called necessary, and she read the policy at her kitchen table until 2 in the morning with a yellow highlighter, and she believes, the way honest people believe, that when reasonable men and women hear the facts will win. Then she comes through the double doors and starts counting. The company has 5 lawyers at their table. She has one, a young man doing this half as a favor. The lawyers have banker boxes on a rolling cart. She has a folder. And then her lawyer leans over and whispers the thing he probably should not, that the judge on the bench this morning spent 19 years as outside counsel for insurance firms, this one among them, before he was ever a judge. Nobody in that room has broken a single rule. That is what she cannot get over. Standing there holding her folder, there will be no lie she can catch, no villain she can point to. She has simply walked into a room where the other side owns the table, the chairs, the procedure, and the man in the robe, and her case, however true, weighs 4 ounces against all that furniture. Some rooms defeat you at the door. Job is about to draw the blueprint of the most impossible room in the universe, because by the middle of this book, Job has stopped asking for sympathy. Read his language closely through these chapters, and you will notice it changing, hardening, becoming technical. He starts talking like a man preparing litigation. I desire to argue my case with God, he says, and the word is legal. I have prepared my case. He says, I know I will be vindicated. He talks about summons. Call me, and I will answer. Or let me speak, and you reply. And near the end of his speeches he goes all the way, and you can hear the gavel in it. Here is my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser put his indictment in writing. Feel the audacity of that. A man on an ash heap, scraping his boils with a broken pot, is serving papers on heaven. He signs his own defense like an affidavit. He demands the charges against him in writing, because that is what a defendant is owed, and no document has ever arrived. If suffering is a sentence, Job wants to see the verdict that produced it. If there was a trial, he was not present for it, so he will force one. He will take God to court. And then, in chapter 9, Job, the plaintiff, sits down, and Job, the realist, does the math. And the case collapses on the table in front of him. Not because he doubts his facts. His facts are the one thing he never doubts. It collapses because of the architecture of the courtroom. Listen to him reason it out. How can a mortal be righteous before God? He asks. Meaning, how could a man ever win a verdict against him? He is not a man like me, that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. There it is. A trial needs two parties of the same standing, facing each other across a level floor. But one party here spoke galaxies into being, and the other party is dust with a case file. And it gets worse. And Job sees exactly how it gets worse. The judge is not a neutral third person in this dispute. The judge is the defendant. The bench and the accused are the same, even if Job was summoned. Even if I called and he answered me. Job says, I do not believe he would give me a hearing, because who could compel him? Who subpoenas the Almighty? Who audits heaven? The woman with the folder, at least, had a court of appeals somewhere above her judge. Job looks up from his ash heap and understands that there is no floor above this floor. This is the top, the power, the bench, the law itself. All of it lives on the other side of the room, and the room runs to the horizon. And it is here, at the exact bottom of that realization, that Job says the sentence this entire book has been walking toward. He is not making an argument now. This is closer to a groan that accidentally became theology. If only there were someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together, someone to lay his hand on us both, to lay his hand on us both. Stay right here. Do not rush past this. Job is describing a person who does not exist in his theology, a figure with no name and no category anywhere in his world, someone with a hand weighty enough to rest on the shoulder of Almighty God, and gentle enough to rest at the same moment on the shoulder of a ruined man in an ash pile, without being out of place in either position. An arbiter, a go-between, someone at home in both directions. Job cannot cite a verse for this person, because no verse exists yet. He is not remembering something he was taught. He is thirsting for something that has never been offered, the way a man dying in a desert describes water he has never seen. If only. That is as far as his theology can carry him. If only there were someone. But watch what happens to that, if only across the arc of his speeches. Because it does something no despair should be able to do. It grows. 7 chapters later, the wish has hardened into a claim, and Job says, even now, my witness is in heaven, my advocate is on high. From if only there was someone, to there is someone. He has no evidence. Nothing about the ash heap has improved, and the conviction rises anyway, like water finding a crack. And then, in chapter 19, it breaks all the way through, and out comes the most famous sentence in the book, maybe the most famous sentence of raw faith in the whole Old Testament. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. Now, that word Redeemer is doing something in Hebrew that the English cannot carry alone. So let me hand it to you properly. The word is Goel, and it is not a mystical word at all. It is a word from family law, concrete as a deed of sale. In ancient Israel, your Goel was your kinsman redeemer, your nearest blood relative, And the law gave that relative specific, binding obligations. If you fell into debt and lost your family land, the Goel bought it back. If you were sold into slavery, the Goel paid the price and walked you home. If you were wronged and had no voice, the Goel stood up in the gate, in court, and argued your case as his own. Here is the part you cannot miss. Not just anyone could do this for you. No matter how rich, no matter how willing, a stranger had no standing. The law required blood. Only family could redeem. Because redemption was not charity. It was kinship exercising its rights. So now hear what Job is actually claiming from that ash heap. With the potsherd still in his hand, that broken piece of a jar that used to be whole, somewhere, he says, I have family. I look like a man with no one, covered in sores, buried in verdicts, but I have a blood relative with standing in the highest court there is. And he is not dead. He lives. And this dispute does not end in this ash pile, because in the end, on soil, like the soil under me, he will stand up, the loneliest man on earth just claimed next of kin in heaven. About 3,000 years later, a composer named Handel set that exact sentence to music. And every December, in concert halls all over America, people rise to their feet while a soprano sings, I know that my Redeemer liveth. Most of them have no idea. They are singing the words of a bankrupt man, scraping his skin outside a city dump. The most triumphant sentence in the repertoire has a return address. And the return address is an ash heap. Now, one honest caution, because this book deserves honest handling. In the very next chapters, Job sinks again. The confidence of chapter 19 flickers. The despair rolls back in. And he does not stay on that mountaintop. His hope in this book is not a settled doctrine. It is lightning, brilliant, brief, gone. And the dark after, it seems darker. Job never explains who his Goel is. He never could have. He is a man describing a shape in the fog, the shape of an advocate, a witness, a kinsman with a hand for both shoulders. Centuries later, people who had stood at a certain empty tomb would read Job 9 and Job 19 and feel the hair rise on their arms, because they had seen that shape walk out of the fog with a name. But that is their reading. From the far side of events Job never lived to see. In his own moment, all Job has is the thirst and the flash and the dark. So keep the word. That is all this chapter asks of you. Fold Goel up and put it in your pocket. Kinsmen, blood, standing, the hand on both shoulders. There are 3 more turns in this road, and at the second one, in the dark, that word is going to come back for you, and it will be carrying more weight than Job ever knew it could hold. Job wanted his day in court because his own case was airtight. But a strange thing happens to a man who has been sitting in the ashes long enough with his eyes open. He starts to look past his own file, and when Job finally lifts his head and looks out at the world beyond his ash heap, at how the whole thing actually runs, what he sees out there is about to offend him more than anything that has happened to him. It is 9 at night in a kitchen in Michigan, and a 58-year-old man is eating cereal for dinner, because cereal is what you eat when the severance ran out in March. 31 years at the same company. He was the guy who turned in receipts other men would have padded. The guy who stayed late without logging it. The guy who told the new hires, do it right, even when nobody is looking. Because he believed the book's balance. Believed it, the way you believe, a load-bearing wall. Then came the restructuring, an 11-minute video call, a screen share he was not supposed to see for a second and a half, and his name on a list. 6 months later, he hears the rest of it from a friend who stayed. The manager who built that list had been massaging the numbers for 2 years. And the missing money is why the department got cut. And that manager did not go to prison. That manager got promoted. Corner office. A floor up. The man sets his spoon down in the bowl, and he says the thing to his wife. Quietly. No drama. Which is how men like him say the biggest things. I did everything right. Somebody tell me which number I got wrong. Job chapter 21 is that kitchen, with the lights burning 4,000 years. Because there comes a point in Job's speeches where he stops defending his own file and starts auditing the whole world. And chapter 21 is where he slides the audit across the table at his friends. Their entire theology rests on one claim, that the universe runs on moral bookkeeping. Righteousness in, blessing out, sin in, suffering out. Reliable as gravity. Fine, says Job. Look out the window with me. Why do the wicked live on? Growing old and increasing in power. They see their children established around them, their offspring before their eyes. Their homes are safe and free from fear. The rod of God is not on them. Read that line again. The rod of God is not on them. Job is not describing wicked men suffering secret misery behind their gates. He is describing wicked men sleeping well. Their bull breeds and does not fail. Their children dance. They sing to the tambourine. They spend their years in prosperity. And they go down to the grave in peace, in old age, in comfort. And Job even follows the coffin. Listen to this detail. The procession is grand. The soil of the valley is sweet to them, and watch is kept over their tomb, honored in life, guarded in death. That is the audit. And every man in that circle of friends knew names to go with it. And so do you, because you have your own file. Do you not? Everybody does. The contractor who cheated half the county and retired to the lake house. The executive whose recklessness wrecked 10,000 pensions and cost him nothing but a news cycle. The abuser everyone protected because he was charming and generous on Sundays. The gentle woman down the street who never hurt a soul in her life. Sitting in an infusion chair on Tuesday afternoons. The kid who is paying full price. In his body. In his childhood. For decisions 2 adults made before he could walk. Line those up against the formula. Righteousness in, blessing out. And the formula does not bend. It breaks. Job is not being cynical in chapter 21. He is being empirical. He is standing in front of 3 theologians with a fistful of receipts, saying your math does not survive contact with the street. And I notice that none of you will look out the window. Now here is where somebody always gets nervous. So let us stand still and settle it. Is Job allowed to say this? Is this not dangerous ground? Cataloging the failures of justice out loud, in front of God. Well, open the book of Psalms, the prayer book, God gave his own people. And find Psalm 73, where a worship leader named Asaph writes, "My feet had almost slipped, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles." He says, their bodies are healthy and strong. That is an usher at the front door of the sanctuary. Admitting the math nearly took his faith, or the prophet Jeremiah, God's own mouthpiece, opening a prayer with the words, "You are always righteous, Lord, when I bring a case before you, yet I would speak with you about your justice. Why does the way of the wicked prosper?" A prophet filing Job's exact question, or Habakkuk standing on his watchtower, demanding to know how long the Lord will make him look at injustice, while the guilty swallow up the righteous. This question is not contraband smuggled into Scripture. It is load-bearing. It has its own psalms, its own prophets, its own books. The Bible nailed the problem of unpunished evil to the center of the sanctuary wall. In a frame, with lighting, it is formula religion that keeps trying to take it down and carry it to the basement. Because formula religion cannot survive the window. And the Bible is not afraid of the window. Which brings us to this chapter's counterfeit. And it is the most respectable one on the whole road. It is the formula wearing the costume of loyalty to God. It sounds like defending him. Say the wicked always fall, because God is just. Say the righteous are always repaid, because God is faithful. Round the world's sharp edges off in his honor. Tuck the exceptions out of sight like bad receipts. Guard the brand. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar spent 30 chapters doing exactly that. Sincerely, eloquently, and they were certain, all the way to the last page, that heaven appreciated the effort. And I am going to tell you something now, ahead of schedule, because you have earned it by walking this far. When God finally speaks at the end of this book, he is going to render a verdict on those 3 men, out loud, and it is the most shocking sentence in the entire story, because it turns out God was listening to every word of their loyal, polished, formula defense, and he is about to call it something no one in that circle saw coming. A lie is still a lie when you tell it in God's honor. He does not accept that kind of testimony, not even on his own behalf. Hold that. We are not at the sentencing yet, but the gavel is already in his hand. So here is this chapter's question, and it costs something. So take your time. What is in your file? What have you seen with your own eyes that does not fit the formula you were raised on? The thing you have kept, folded up and out of sight for years, because looking at it straight felt disloyal to God. Here is what this book has been trying to tell you since the ash heap. Taking that file out is not the beginning of unbelief. Job took his out and read it to heaven at full volume. And of everyone in the story, he is the one God never once corrects for it. The formula was never the faith. The formula was furniture. And some furniture has to break before you find out what the house is actually standing on. But be warned about where this road goes next, because an honest audit has a floor under it, and the floor has a trapdoor. If the books do not balance in this life, then everything rides on one question, the darkest one on the whole road, the one every human being asks at least once, standing in the doorway of a room where someone they loved is not anymore. If the ledger does not balance here, Is there anywhere left for it to balance? When a man dies, is that the end of him? It is a Saturday morning in a guest bedroom in North Carolina, and a woman is cleaning out her mother's closet. Because somebody told her it was time. She is doing it well. That is the thing about her. She does hard jobs well. She has a system. 3 piles on the bed. Keep, donate, discard. And for 2 hours the system holds. Blouses her mother never wore. Donate, the robe from the hospital months. Discard, quickly, without looking at it. A scarf still in its gift box. Keep, maybe. She will decide later. The system holds and holds, and then her hand closes on wool, and the system dies on the spot. It is the green sweater, the Christmas sweater, the one her mother put on every December morning for 30 years to make pancakes in. And when she lifts it off the hanger, the smell comes up out of the wool. Hand, lotion, and coffee, and something underneath that is not any product. That is just her mother, still in the fibers. 14 weeks after the funeral, she sits down on the closet floor with the sweater against her chest. And the question that comes is not a church question. It is older than church. Where is she? And do not hand me the greeting card. She thinks, not in a better place, not looking down on us, not smiling from heaven. Those are things people say with their hands in their pockets. I am asking the real question. My mother, the one who wore this, the one who was just here. Where is she? Job asked it first, sitting in his ashes with 10 graves on the hill behind him. And he asked it while staring at a tree stump. Chapter 14 is the quietest chapter in the book. The lawyer in Job goes silent here. The fire banks down, and what is left is a man thinking slowly about death the way you think about it at 2 in the morning. And his whole meditation hangs on one image from the natural world. At least there is hope for a tree. Job says, if it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail. Its roots may grow old in the ground, and its stump die in the soil. Yet, at the scent of water, it will bud and put forth shoots like a plant. Any farmer has seen it. You take a tree down to the stump. You walk away. You call it dead. And 2 springs later, there are green shoots standing up out of the ruin. Because somewhere under the dirt, the roots caught the smell of rain. The text actually says that the scent of water, as if the dead thing underground still has a sense left, still knows when hope walks by. A tree can be killed and not be finished. A tree gets a second act. And then Job turns from the stump and looks at his own hands. But a man dies and is laid low. He breathes his last. And where is he? As water disappears from the sea, as a riverbed becomes parched and dry, so he lies down and does not rise. Man is cut down once, and the ground where he fell stays quiet. No shoots, no spring. Job stands in front of that stump and does the hardest thing an honest man can do. He envies it. God, you gave the tree a door out of death. Why does the tree get what your children do not? And it is right here, at the bottom of that thought, that Job says this chapter's question out loud. Plainly, no rhetoric left in him. If a man dies, will he live again? Now hold still, because watch what happens in the very next breath. The question is barely out of his mouth, the darkest question there is, and something rises in him, unbidden, like those shoots out of the stump. All the days of my hard service I will wait for my renewal to come. You will call, and I will answer you. You will long for the creature your hands have made. Do you hear what he just did? Job just imagined his own death. The dust, the silence, the waiting. And then he imagined it interrupted by a voice. Not his voice, God's. You will call, and I will answer. And the reason he gives for that call is the tenderest sentence this broken man ever speaks. You will long for the creature your hands have made. Job dares to imagine a God who misses him, a maker standing over the dust of his workmanship, the way that woman sits holding the sweater, unable to let the beloved thing stay lost. And finally, saying the name out loud. That is Job's hope, that he matters enough to be wanted back. And then, this being Job, honest to the bone, the light gutters out. Read to the end of chapter 14, and the despair rolls back in like a tide. As water wears away stones, he says, so you destroy a man's hope. The flash and then the dark. That is how hope behaves in this book. And I will not clean it up for you, because the uncleaned version is the version grieving people recognize. Job does not have a doctrine of resurrection worked out in a notebook. What he has is lightning. It flashes in chapter 14. You will call and I will answer. It is. And then, in chapter 19, it comes back one more time. And this time it is the brightest light in the whole Old Testament night. You already have the first half in your pocket. I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end he will stand on the earth. But now hear where that sentence goes next, because Job keeps talking. And what he says while holding that piece of broken pottery against his own ruined skin. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes. I, and not another. How my heart yearns within me. Look at that man. He is scraping skin that is falling apart. He can watch his own body failing in real time. The evidence is literally in his hand. And he looks down at the wreckage of himself and says, from inside this flesh, these eyes, this me, and not some replacement, I will see him. His heart is not resigned when he says it. The text says it yearns, faints in him. The word is almost violent. This is not a man reciting a doctrine. This is a man in love with a moment he has never been promised, insisting it exists. Now let me say the pastoral thing plainly. For the woman on the closet floor, and for whoever is sitting where she sits, faith never asks a grieving person to pretend that death has taken nothing. Job never pretends the stump and the man are the same. Never waves the graves away. Never says it is fine because heaven. The Bible does not traffic in that. What Job refuses, the single thing he plants his flag on, is the idea that the Maker forgets. You will long for the creature your hands have made. Your grief is not a faith problem to be solved. Your grief is the echo of the same longing God himself has for the ones his hands made. And the sweater against your chest and the yearning in your heart, those are not signs you have failed to move on. They are the family resemblance again. Love refusing to file the beloved under discard. So here is this chapter's question, and take it gently. What is your green sweater? The thing you cannot put in any pile. The object, or the song, or the doorway that still carries the person. You have wondered if holding on to it means your faith is weak. Turn that around. Maybe the ache to see them again. Them and not another. With your own eyes. Is not weakness at all. Maybe that ache is a compass. And it points at something Job saw by lightning. 4,000 years before you were born, Job has now asked his questions about death, and heaven has said nothing. Same as always. After him, one more voice takes a turn. A fourth friend, younger and angrier, who talks for 6 more chapters. And while that young man is still talking, if you had been standing on that ash heap facing the desert, you would have seen it. Out on the horizon, the sky beginning to turn, a darkness with motion inside it. Coming this way, the silence is about to end. Before the storm arrives, the book does a strange and beautiful thing. It stops, and it sings. Chapter 28, right in the middle of all the arguing, is a poem about mining, and it reads like the writer had been down in the shafts himself. There is a mine for silver. It begins, and a place where gold is refined. And then it takes you down there, into the dark under the mountains, where men cut shafts in valleys far from where anyone lives, in places forgotten by the foot of man, and they dangle on ropes in the blackness, swinging far from other people. Tiny lamps in a dark the sun has never touched. The poem is in awe of us. You need to hear that. It is in awe of human beings. The eye of the falcon has never seen the path down there. It says, the lion has never walked it. But man goes down. Man puts his hand to the flinty rock and overturns mountains by the roots. He dams up rivers to get at what is underneath. He brings hidden things into the light, sapphires from the dust, gold from the rock. There is nothing buried in this earth that human beings cannot find. No depth we will not go to. No dark we will not carry a lamp into. And then the poem stops at the bottom of the deepest shaft, hauls up its lamp, and asks, but where can wisdom be found? Where does understanding live? Man does not comprehend its worth. It cannot be found in the land of the living. The deep says, it is not in me. The sea says, it is not with me. It cannot be bought with the gold of Ophir, with precious onyx or sapphires. 4,000 years later, we have gone deeper than that poet could dream. We have split the atom and read the genome and put a camera outside the solar system. We have mined everything. We can find anything. And the one thing that poem says we cannot dig up is still the one thing we cannot dig up. Why? Why this diagnosis? Why this child? Why this family? Why now? Understanding is not a mineral. It has never once come up out of a shaft. The poem says only God knows the way to it. He saw wisdom when he set the weight of the wind and measured out the waters, which means if the why is going to come to a man, it will not come because he dug. It will come, if it comes at all, because God walks over and hands it to him. And now, at last, God comes. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Stop right there, on the word storm, because you have been carrying something since chapter 1, and it is time to take it out. Think back. What took Job's children? A great wind came in off the desert and struck the four corners of the house. The single worst instrument of Job's destruction, the shape his catastrophe wore, was a windstorm. And now God has finally come to speak to this man. And of all the forms in creation he could arrive in, the still small voice he used on another broken servant, a burning bush, a quiet dream. He chooses a whirlwind. He speaks to Job from inside the very shape of the thing that ruined him. Whatever else that means, it means this: God does not tiptoe around the site of your wound, does not avoid the subject, does not meet you anywhere but the truth. He walks straight into the shape of the worst thing that ever happened to you, and he makes it the place you finally hear his voice. And what does the voice say? 60 questions. Nobody was ready for that. Job demanded answers. And God arrives, carrying nothing but questions. And he opens with the one this chapter is named for. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me, if you understand. And then God takes Job on a tour. And it is the most cinematic passage in the entire Bible. So see it. Where were you when the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Creation had an audience, and it had a soundtrack, and you were not there. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? Did you catch that picture? The ocean as a newborn, and God as the midwife, swaddling the sea in fog, like a mother wrapping an infant. Have you ever given orders to the morning, or shown the dawn its place? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Have you seen the storehouses of the hail? Where does light live, and where does darkness make its home? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain, to water a land where no one lives, a desert with no one in it? Slow down on that one. God waters deserts nobody will ever see. He sends beauty into empty country, rain on land with no farmer and no audience, because his generosity is not a performance and never was. Do you hunt the prey for the lioness? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Up on the crags, with no one attending. Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? And then, in the middle of all this thunder, God does something that should make you smile, because I promise you it is in the text. He brings up the ostrich. She flaps her wings joyfully. God says, though they cannot compare with the wings of the stork. She lays her eggs on the ground and forgets a foot might crush them. She treats her young harshly. She has no sense. And yet, when she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at horse and rider. God made a bird too silly to guard her own eggs and too fast for a war horse to catch. And he points her out to a suffering man, the way a father points out something ridiculous and wonderful from the truck window. There is a wildness in this world that answers to no formula. God is saying, and I delight in her. I made things that make no sense on your spreadsheet, and they are good. On and on it rolls. Behemoth, whose bones are bronze. Leviathan, who leaves a shining wake and fears nothing made. Stars in their courses, the Pleiades on their chains. And now stand back from the whole speech and notice what is not in it, because what is missing is the loudest part. God never mentions the courtroom in heaven, never explains the challenge, never names the accuser, never breathes a word about why. He does not say the children are safe. He does not say this was a test and you passed. He does not apologize. does not promise restoration, does not so much as acknowledge that a case was ever filed. 60 questions from the mouth of God, and not one sentence of explanation. The man asked why for 35 chapters, and God showed up in person and talked about ostriches. There is a father in Colorado who understands this speech better than most commentaries do. His son was born with a brain that will never let him live on his own. And for years, the father read every book, the theology of suffering, the purpose-driven explanations, all of it. And none of it moved the weight an inch. Then one August night, past midnight, he could not breathe in the house anymore. So he drove east out of the city until the last street light was behind him, and pulled over on a farm road, and shut the engine off, and got out, and the sky came down on him. No moon, 10,000 stars, the whole horse head of the Milky Way rearing over the plains. Silence so complete he could hear his own blood. And he stood there and felt himself getting smaller and smaller. And here is the strange part, the part he still cannot explain at church. It did not crush him. It was the first relief he had felt in 3 years. Getting smaller felt like being carried. He said later, "It felt like being a kid again in my grandfather's house, lying in bed, hearing adults still awake downstairs, voices through the floor. And you do not know what they are saying, and you do not need to know, because the sound of them means somebody bigger is up, and the house is held, and you can sleep." He drove home at 2 in the morning with nothing solved and everything different. That is the whirlwind. That is what it is for. Because look at what actually happened to Job under all those questions. God was not humiliating him. And here is how you can be sure. Hold this proof, because we will need it in the next chapter. When this is all over, God is going to say, out loud, that Job spoke rightly. You do not say that about a man you just crushed for asking. No, the questions were doing something else. Job had been reasoning like this. My suffering has no explanation I can find. Therefore, there is no wisdom behind the world at all. The books do not balance. The bench is empty. And God's answer is to take him by the collar and walk him through a universe saturated with mind. Order upon order, wildness and precision braided together, beauty spent on empty deserts, care attending mountain births no one sees, and then to ask, gently and terribly, you cannot manage one ostrich. Son, are you certain you have enough data to audit the universe? He does not hand Job the causal diagram. He hands Job himself, not the why, the who, and he wagers everything on the possibility that the who is enough. Now reach into your pocket. Take out the word I gave you 3 chapters ago. Go, el, the kinsman withstanding, blood, or no redemption. Because here is the honest edge of the whirlwind, the place where even this magnificent speech leaves a man wanting. God has come close, gloriously close, but he is still a voice in a storm, still 60 feet of wind between them. And Job's oldest request, the one he groaned in chapter 9, is still sitting there unfilled. Someone to lay his hand on us both, a hand on God's shoulder and a hand on mine. The whirlwind is presence, real presence, but it is not yet that. No hand comes out of the wind. Centuries pass, and the people who followed a carpenter out of Nazareth began to tell of things that made the old men among them go back and read Job with shaking hands, because the word for what they said God did is Job's word. Kin. The law said only blood could redeem. A stranger has no standing. And so, they said, God took on blood, became the relative, nursed at a human breast, learned to walk on human feet, wept at a human graveside, so that when he stood up in the court of heaven to argue for us, no one could object that he lacked standing, because he was family now. Urs, bone and breath, the Goel Job described in the fog. They said they had eaten breakfast with him. And one Friday, outside Jerusalem, on a hill shaped like a skull, the sky went dark at noon, and the kinsman hung on a beam of wood with iron through his wrists. And at 3 p.m, he gathered what was left of his breath and screamed a question, not a statement, a question. The question, the one from the parking garage, the one from the ash heap, the one you have carried up this whole road. My God, why? Out of his mouth, the only truly innocent sufferer in the history of the world, the one person with an actual right to a full explanation, hit the bottom of the pain, and what came out was Job's question, word for word. And heaven, hear this, and do not look away. Heaven did not explain. No voice came, no angel with a diagram. The sky stayed dark and stayed silent, and he died with the question still hanging in the air, unanswered, exactly like yours. On Friday, the why got silence, and on Sunday morning, the why got something else, not an answer. An empty tomb is not an explanation. Nobody walked out of that garden holding the causal diagram, understanding at last why suffering exists. They walked out having seen him, alive, standing on the earth, just like a broken man with a potsherd once swore his Redeemer would. The question was never answered. The question was outlived, outloved, swallowed by an event so much bigger than the explanation that the disciples, notice this, spent the rest of their lives and letters almost never asking why anymore. Not because they got the answer, because they got him. So here is the last counterfeit on this road, and it may be the one that has been running your nights. It is the belief that understanding is what heals. I will be okay when I know why. Get the explanation, get the closure, get the reason. Then I can live again. It feels airtight. It is not. And here is the proof. And it is a hard proof. So hold on. Ask the parents who did get the explanation, the full medical workup, the genetic report, the accident reconstruction. Every mechanism mapped, every question answered. Ask them if the knowing healed them. They will tell you the folder is in a drawer, and the wound is right where it was. Explanations, close cases. They do not close wounds. They were never medicine. And the proof is that the people who have them hurt exactly as much as the people who do not. What heals is not information. It is presence. The hand on the shoulder. The someone in the room. Job is patient number 1 of that medicine, and his chart is about to show it. Because the wind is dying down now over the ash heap, the dust is settling, And the man who demanded his day in court for 35 chapters is pushing himself up off the ground. And he is about to say his final words in this book. They are short. And then God is going to turn, at last, toward those three friends sitting there in their certainty, and deliver the verdict I promised you. The one no one in that circle, and almost no one in church today, ever sees coming. Come back to the parking garage. Come back to the man in the car with the door chiming. The one who asked the windshield for one thing. Just tell me why. It is 14 months later now, and I owe you the truth about how his story went. Because you have walked a long road with me, and you have earned the undecorated version. His wife did not get the miracle the church prayed for on Wednesday nights. The treatments bought time. Good time. Time with weight in it. But they did not buy the ending everyone asked for. And one morning, this past spring, standing at the kitchen counter waiting on the coffee, he caught himself doing something that stopped him cold. He was praying. Still, 14 months passed, the night in the garage, past the funeral, past every unanswered why. And there he was, with his eyes closed over a coffee maker, talking to God, like a man talks to someone who never left the house. The prayers are different now, shorter, no negotiating in them, no proposals, no fine print, but they never stopped, and the why never got answered. It just... And this is exactly how he describes it. It just changed seats. It used to sit on the judge's bench of his life, banging the gavel, running the whole courtroom. Now it rides along in the passenger seat, still in the car, every mile. It just does not drive anymore. Nobody explained anything to that man. Something else happened to him. And whatever it was, it happened to Job first, because the wind has died down over the ash heap now, and Job is getting up off the ground. And the book gives him his last words. And after 35 chapters of magnificent thunder from this man, his final speech is barely a breath. Listen to the center of it. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Stand very still in front of that sentence, because everything is in it. Notice the word that is missing. Job does not say, "Now I understand." He never says it. Not here, not anywhere, because it would not be true. He understands nothing more than he did an hour ago. Not one fact about his disaster has been explained. The graves on the hill are still full and still unexplained. What Job says instead is, "Now I have seen. There was a God I had heard about. The God of the formulas. The God my friends kept defending. Second-hand, reliable, filed away. And then there is the God who just walked me through the storehouses of the snow with his own voice. I have met him now, and a met God and a heard about God are not the same size." Then Job says he repents in dust and ashes. And here, churches have sometimes gotten this wrong in a way that matters. So let us be careful. Repent of what? Go ahead and search the transcript for the sin, because God is about to declare, in about 4 verses, that Job spoke rightly. The crying out was not the sin. The anger was not the sin. The questions were not the sin. What Job lays down in the dust is not his honesty. It is his lawsuit, the case files, the demand for the indictment, the whole apparatus of a man who believed he could not live without a verdict. He drops the papers, not because he lost the case, But because he has met the defendant, and somewhere in the meeting the case stopped being the thing holding him together, you do not keep deposing someone whose hand is on your shoulder. And then God turns. And what happens next is the most shocking moment in the entire book. And I have been promising it to you since the ash heap. And here it is. God turns to Eliphaz, the senior man, the gray-haired, the one with the visions and the decades. And God says this: I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. Read it again, slowly, because 40 years of church can slide right over it. The three men who defended God for 30 chapters, who guarded his reputation, who kept the formulas polished and said all the correct sentences about his justice. God is angry with them for lying about him. And the man who howled at the sky, who demanded God appear in court, who said out loud that the Almighty had wronged him, that man God calls truthful. And look at what God calls him: my servant Job. Do you remember where that phrase lives? Page 1. It vanished for 40 chapters, while everyone on that ash heap, including sometimes Job himself, wondered whether it still applied. And now it comes back from the mouth of God 4 times in 2 verses. My servant Job. My servant Job. Like a father saying a name deliberately in front of the people who mocked it. The title survived every angry word. The furious, flailing, brutally honest man was inside his standing with God the entire time, and the polite defenders were outside of theirs. And none of them, not one, would have called it that way. Here is why it falls like that. And this is the sentence to carry out of this whole book. A lie told in God's honor is still a lie, and God does not accept false testimony, even on his own behalf. The friend said untrue things about how the world works, that suffering always tracks sin, that the ledger always balances by Friday, and they said them to protect God. And God does not want that kind of protection, because he is not the kind of king who needs the court records falsified. Job said wild things, unbalanced things, things he later dropped in the dust. But he said them about a real God to a real God, with his actual heart, in his actual mouth. Heaven can work with a true scream. It has no use whatsoever for a false compliment. And then God does one more thing to those 3 men, and it is so pointed, it almost makes you laugh. He does not just rebuke them, he assigns them a mediator. Go to my servant Job. He says, offer sacrifices, and my servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer. The men who spent a month explaining Job's guilt now need Job's prayers to be forgiven. The defendant they convicted is the only priest in the county. And Job. This is the part that gets me every time. Job does it. No recorded speech. No settling of scores. No, I told you so after 30 chapters of being told. The text simply says he prayed for his friends. The man prayed for the people who had handed him verdicts while he sat in ashes. If you are carrying wounds that were given to you by religious people, by the ones with the confident answers, look hard at this verse, because the road out of that particular pain apparently runs through a prayer you say for them. And then comes the sentence with the timestamp in it. And do not miss the timestamp. The Lord restored Job's fortunes after Job had prayed for his friends. After. The turning in Job's circumstances arrives while he is on his knees on behalf of the men who hurt him worst. Now, the restoration, twice the sheep, twice the camels, twice the oxen and donkeys, the brothers and sisters coming back around the table. And here your guard should go up, because this ending has been misused to sell a formula. Suffer correctly, and God doubles your money. And that reading is not just shallow. It quietly insults every believer whose losses were never repaid in this life. And it misses what the text actually does. Because look at the arithmetic. Every flock is doubled. And then 10 children. Job had 10 before. 7 sons. 3 daughters. Same count. Not doubled. Why does everything double except the children? You already know why. Sheep are property, and property replaces. Children are souls, and souls do not. 10 new children do not close 10 old graves. And the book of Job knows it, and encoded it right into the numbers, so no honest reader could ever preach it away. The first 10 are not replaced. Some readers across the centuries have whispered the other possibility inside that arithmetic, that the count stayed the same, because the first 10 are not gone, only elsewhere. Still his, still counted. The book does not say. The book just refuses to double the number and leaves the graves on the hill, quietly, in view of the party. But it also refuses to leave Job in the ashes. And hear this half too, because it is just as true. The man lives again, not around the sorrow, with it. And the text gives us one detail from the after years. 1. So it must matter. Job names his 3 daughters, and Scripture, which routinely skips daughters entirely, stops to record the names. Yemimah, which is a dove, Keziah, which is cinnamon, Kirin Hapush, which is, of all things, a little jar of eye makeup, Adove, a spice, a cosmetics jar. Those are not the names a bitter man gives his children. Those are the names of a man who has learned to see loveliness again. Small, fragrant, ordinary loveliness. And he gave his girls an inheritance alongside their brothers, which almost no one in that world did, as if grace had made him generous in directions his culture never required. The graves stayed on the hill, and the man planted gardens anyway. Grief and life, both true at once, all the way to the end. That is the only honest version of restoration, this side of the resurrection, and it is enough to build on. And now, the last thing, the thing I told you in chapter 1 to hold with both hands. Job lived 140 more years. He saw 4 generations of his family. He died, the book says, old and full of years. The same phrase used for Abraham, a man completed, not merely expired. And in all those 140 years, in everything the text records, no one ever told him about the courtroom in heaven. Go look. The scene you saw in chapter 1, the challenge, the accuser, the wager over whether any man loves God for free. Job went to his grave, as far as Scripture shows, never knowing any of it. The reader gets the explanation. The man never does. He raised his new babies, buried his old grief, watched his great-great-grandchildren learn to walk, and did every bit of it inside an unanswered question. And here is what that means. And it may be the quietest, biggest thing this book has to say. You have been assuming the explanation is what makes a life inside suffering possible. Job is the proof that it is not. 140 years. Full on nothing but the memory of a voice in a storm and the company of the one it belonged to. It turns out a human being can live a whole rich life without ever learning why. It turns out that is not the exception. That is faith, the actual substance of it. Trusting God, because life makes sense, is a fair weather arrangement. And the weather always turns. Job started there. We all start there. Where he ended was the other country, the one this whole road has been walking toward. Trusting him when life does not make sense. Has not made sense for years. May never make sense this side of the grass. Not because you finally understood, because you finally met. There is one stretch of road left. It is the shortest one. And it is not in Uz. And it is not in the 1st century. It is in your kitchen. Tomorrow morning. And there is a question waiting there beside the coffee maker. And it already knows your name. Look back down the road once before you walk into the day. A man lost everything in one afternoon and cursed the day of his birth. Out loud. Toward heaven. And heaven kept a record of it without one syllable of shame. 3 friends did their best work in 7 days of silence, and their worst work the moment they started explaining. A man yelled his honest fury straight up at the sky and turned out to be closer to God than the men reciting compliments. He searched east and west and north and south and found nothing, and planted his flag on being seen instead of seeing. He drew up a lawsuit against heaven and stumbled onto the deepest wish a human being ever wished. Someone to lay a hand on us both. He audited the world and found the books unbalanced and said so. And God never once corrected him for it. He stood in front of a tree stump and asked if a man gets what a tree gets, and dared to imagine a maker who misses his workmanship. Then God came, in the shape of the very storm that ruined him, carrying 60 questions and 0 explanations, and gave a broken man not the why but the who. And the who turned out to be enough to build 140 years on. So the only question left is the one this whole road was built to ask you. Which one of them are you this morning? Some of you are on the ash heap right now. The loss so fresh, the casseroles are still coming. Here is your sentence. Keep it in your pocket today. I do not owe anyone an explanation of my pain, and neither does God owe my neighbors one. Let the 7 days be 7 days. The friends who sit down in the ashes without a verdict, keep those, the ones who arrive, holding explanations. You are allowed to let that go unanswered. Some of you are the woman in the closet, angry at God and terrified of the anger. Your sentence is this. God called the man who yelled at him my servant 4 times, out loud, in front of the people who doubted it. Anger carried to his face is still prayer. It is the silence of a turned back that starves a faith, never the noise of an honest fight. Tell him tonight. The first draft, he has read it already anyway. Some of you are in the chair at 6:15, praying into what your senses swear is an empty house. Yours is this. He knows the way that I take. 4 horizons can come up empty, and that sentence still holds. Because faith was never the ability to see him. It is the refusal to believe he has lost sight of you. Keep the chair. The chair is the prayer. Some of you flinched in chapter 2, because you have been the friend. You have said the sentences at the funerals, next to the casseroles, and now you know what they weigh. Hear how gently the book treats you. The three friends were forgiven, fully, through the prayers of the very man they wounded. So it is not too late to go back to somebody and say 5 words. I said it wrong. Forgive me. That sentence heals more than every casserole in the county. And some of you are holding the green sweater, and the grave is not theoretical to you. It has a name and a date, and you were there. Yours is the tenderest sentence on this road. So hold it with both hands. You will call, and I will answer. You will long for the creature your hands have made. The ache to see them again, them and not another, with your own eyes. Is not your faith failing? It is your faith pointing. The Maker misses his workmanship more than you do, and he has already demonstrated, one Sunday morning, exactly what he intends to do about graves. Maybe you found yourself in more than one of those. Most honest people do. Take every sentence you need. They were written for you a long time ago, in worse ashes than yours. Before you pick up that cup, let me pray a short one over you, and I will keep it plain, because you have had enough performances for one lifetime. Father, this friend of mine has a why that you have not answered. I am not going to pretend you explained it, and I am not going to explain it for you. Just do for them what you did for the man in the ashes. Come close enough to be seen. Guard the honest words they bring you, and be gentle with the angry ones, the way you were with his. And on the mornings when the house feels empty, remind them whose hand is on their shoulder, and do not let go of it. Amen. Now, one last thing, and then the road is yours. There was a piece of broken pottery on that ash heap, a shard of some jar that used to be whole, that used to sit in a house that used to be full, and the most ruined man on earth picked it up and held it. And it was with that broken thing in his hand that he said the words the whole world now stands up to hear every December. I know that my Redeemer lives, and in the end he will stand upon the earth. He did not need to know why the jar broke to say it. He did not need to know why anything broke. He just needed to know his kinsman was alive. You do not know why. You may never know why. Not on this side, but you were never asked to carry the why. You were asked to know the who, and the who has blood ties to you now, and a hand for your shoulder, and a habit of showing up inside the very storms that took everything. Speaking, God never told Job why. He told Job who. 4,000 years of believers have sat in the ashes since, and run that answer all the way to the bottom, and not one of them found the bottom empty. You will not be the first.